Hey, we're live. Hello. Welcome to another thrilling installment of the Isolated Literary Society Presents. Timer's going off to remind me that it's time for the stream to start. Thank you, phone. Go ahead and mute that. Where was I? The Isolated Literary Society Presents Persuasion, Jane Austen. Very exciting. I'm going to tilt these blinds. Oh, there we go. Better lighting. Slightly less dramatic.
Hopefully people are getting their notifications.
Yes. Okay, maybe there. There we go.
Since it's a bit early
Manage the lighting just so over here. Oh, anyway. Hey, how's everyone doing? How's it going? How's it hanging? I had a completely exhausting day of trying to find a damn job, so I am low on Sarah, but we're going to do it. I hope everyone remembers that it's today. It's at 6:30. Tila's here on time.
Woo.
Michelle warned me that her power was out, and so she wouldn't be joining us today.
Wow.
I know. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was like, oh, pizza night, I guess. Because she said, yeah, they said the estimated reinstatement restore time, whatever, is like 11 p.m. And I was like, I guess it's pizza night. And she goes, yeah, assuming that my local pizza place is not on the same grid or whatever.
Right, yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Well,
anyway,
hopefully they at least have backup generators.
Yeah. Anywho, so we're going to keep it tight on schedule today so that when we are done at 7, we will all together transfer over to my friend Dandelion's stream, which I will put link to in the chat in case anybody wants to join me after this for Dandy's show. I'm very excited for it. All right, I guess let's get into it. Let's just get into this. Wrong one. It's not the one we're reading. That one's just picturesque.
It looks like it.
Picturesque. Oh, right. Oh, my heavens. Yeah, like yesterday was so intense, you guys. Louisa's brain is greatly disturbed. Anne has extremely mixed feelings about Captain Wentworth's behavior towards her. Mary is the worst. Yes. Henrietta's useless. So now when we finished the last chapter, Captain Wentworth had conveyed Anne and Henrietta back home to Uppercross to deliver the news to Mr. and Mrs. Musgrove. Tila, I was just looking at your chat. Louisa almost died, and I said Tila instead of Louisa. Louisa is at the Captain and Mrs. Harville's house. Apparently they didn't have hospitals in Lyme. I don't know how that works, but yeah, I guess the doctor who came was all like, she just needs rest. Although it does seem a little bit like
presumably
maybe
she
they
needs
didn't
to
know
not be moved for a long time.
Yes. So they decided she mustn't be moved. So she's staying with the Harvilles at present. She is not dead, but she's not conscious yet. At least last time we heard. Captain Wentworth at the end of the last chapter immediately returned back to Lyme after delivering Anne and Henrietta back to the Musgroves and telling them what was going on. Charles and Mary are in Lyme as well, taking care of Louisa. Charles stands nearby, worrying. Mary probably is just like making it all about her. So they're like actually two of the more useless people that could have stayed. Yeah. I at least understand Charles wanting to stay. Yeah, like he wanted to be there if anything could be done. You know. For his sister, which is totally understandable. Mary is just useless.
Although he did not give the same considerations to his own son when his son was.
That's true. Although it was
also in a
much less serious.
It was much less serious
injury.
His argument at the time was that he couldn't do anything for him, and that sickbed tending was women's work or something like that.
Well, I think
He's like, the child just needs to rest. I can't do anything.
Yeah, I think if I think it's a difference between A, it being a more serious injury, and also B, she's not at home.
That's true.
She's in a strange place. So like if, he needs to like travel to do anything for her or whatever, he wants to be there. I don't know. I
guess
feel
that's a
he's all right.
possibility that he may or may not be thinking if her condition takes a turn for the worse, he might want to be there.
Yeah, for sure. Which I think
she could actually die.
Yeah, it's certainly quite serious. It's a little kid,
which was not the case with his son.
Yeah, it was not life-threatening.
Yeah,
even remotely. As you point out, he probably wants Louisa to be able to see a familiar face when she wakes up too, which is also
not Mary.
And not Mary. Good point. Okay, so anyway, chapter 13. The remainder of Anne's time at Uppercross, comprehending only 2 days, was spent entirely at the mansion house. Apparently, Charles and Mary's children, for the record, are just like with their nursery maid. Like, neither Charles nor Mary were even remotely concerned about getting home to their own children.
Yeah.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
And she had the satisfaction of knowing herself extremely useful there, both as an immediate companion and as assisting in all those arrangements for the future, which, in Mr. and Mrs. Musgrove's distressed state of spirits, would have been difficulties. They had an early account from Lyme the next morning. Louisa was much the same. No symptoms worse than before had appeared. Charles came a few hours afterwards to bring a later and more particular account. He was tolerably cheerful. A speedy cure must not be hoped, but everything was going on as well as the nature of the case admitted. In speaking of the Harvilles, he seemed unable to satisfy his own sense of their kindness, especially of Mrs. Harville's exertions as a nurse. She really left nothing for Mary to do. If she had any sense, she would. He and Mary had been persuaded to go early to their inn last night. Mary had been hysterical again this morning. When he came away, she was going to walk out with Captain Benwick, which he hoped would do her good. He almost wished she had been prevailed on to come home the day before. Almost. And the truth was that Mrs. Harville had left nothing for anybody to do.
Again, probably best.
Right. Charles was to return to Lyme the same afternoon, and his father had at first half a mind to go with him, but the ladies could not consent. It would be going only to multiply trouble to the others and increase his own distress. And a much better scheme followed and was acted on. A chaise was sent. Again, I second guess myself about a chaise. A chaise was sent for from Crewkerne. I cannot get over this place name. It's so weird.
How's it spelled?
Crewkerne. We came across it yesterday, and I was like, Crewkerne? Crewkerne?
Interesting.
It's not at all like other English place names I've seen. It's very unusual.
Yeah.
And Charles conveyed back a far more useful person in the old nursery maid of the family. One who, having brought up all the children and seen the very last, the lingering and long-petted Master Harry, sent to school after his brothers, was now living in her deserted nursery to mend stockings and dress all the blains and bruises she could get near her, and who, consequently, was only too happy in being allowed to go and help nurse dear Miss Louisa.
Oh my gosh.
She just had nothing to do with herself once the kids she took care of grew up. I mean, just gosh, it was a blessing to give her something to do.
I mean, I guess that was usually the case with like nurses and governesses.
She could. I mean, I guess it depends on how old you are.
Can't all be Mrs. Weston.
Yeah, I guess if you stay with one family until you're rather too old to get hired with another one, you might. Yeah, that might be a bit of a difficult.
Or maybe the hope is that like the children would then want you to be nursemaid to their children or something.
Oh yeah,
or, I don't know.
But obviously not because Charles and Mary didn't.
Yeah,
but she might be too old by that point.
Yeah,
it suggests that the last he was considerably younger than the others, I would guess.
Yeah.
The very last, the lingering and long-petted Master Harry sent to school after his brothers. Like, maybe she just, by the time the last kid was gone, she was like, eh.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's completely understandable.
Vague wishes of getting Sarah thither had occurred before to Mrs. Musgrove and Henrietta, but without Anne, it would hardly have been resolved on and found practicable so soon. They were indebted the next day to Charles Hayter for all the minute knowledge of Louisa, which it was essential to obtain every 24 hours. He made it his business to go to Lyme, and his account was still encouraging. The intervals of sense and consciousness were believed to be stronger. Every report agreed in Captain Wentworth's appearing fixed in line. Anne was to leave them on the morrow, an event which they all dreaded. What should they do without her? They were wretched comforters of one another. And so much was said in this way that Anne thought she could not do better than impart among them the general inclination to which she was privy, and persuade them all to go to Lyme at once. She had little difficulty. It was soon determined that they would go tomorrow, fix themselves at the inn, or get into lodgings, as it suited, and there remain till dear Louisa could be moved. They must be taking off some trouble from the good people she was with. They might at least relieve Mrs. Harville from the care of her own children. And in short, they were so happy in the decision that Anne was delighted with what she had done, and felt she could not spend her last morning at Uppercross better than in assisting their preparations and sending them off at an early hour, though her being left to the solitary range of the house was the consequence. She was the last, excepting the little boys at the cottage. She was the very last, the only remaining one of all that had filled and animated both houses, of all that had given Uppercross its cheerful character. A few days had made a change indeed. If Louisa recovered, it would all be well again. More than former happiness would be restored. There could not be a doubt, to her mind there was none, of what would follow her recovery. A few months hence, and the room now so deserted, occupied by her silent, pensive self, might be filled again with all that was happy and gay, all that was glowing and bright in prosperous love, all that was most unlike Anne Elliot.
Oh, she is.
I mean, she is imagining that, well, if Louisa recovers, she and Captain Wentworth will definitely get married. That's obviously going to happen. No questions.
Yeah.
An hour's complete leisure for such reflections as these on a dark November day, a small, thick rain almost blotting out the very few objects ever to be discerned from the windows, was enough to make the sound of Lady Russell's carriage exceedingly welcome. And yet, though desirous to be gone, she could not quit the mansion house, or look an adieu to the cottage, with its black, dripping, and comfortless veranda, or even notice through the misty glasses the last humble tenements of the village without a saddened heart. Scenes had passed in Uppercross, which made it precious. It stood the record of many sensations of pain, once severe but now softened, and of some instances of relenting feeling, some breathings of friendship and reconciliation, which could never be looked for again, and which could never cease to be dear. She left it all behind her, all but the recollection that such things had been. Anne had never entered Kellynch since her quitting Lady Russell's house in September. It had not been necessary, and the few occasions of its being possible for her to go to the hall, she had contrived to evade and escape from. Her first return was to resume her place in the modern and elegant apartments of the lodge, and to gladden the eyes of its mistress. There was some anxiety mixed with Lady Russell's joy in meeting her. She knew who had been frequenting Uppercross, but happily, either Anne was so improved But happily, either Anne was so improved in plumpness and looks, or Lady Russell fancied her so, and Anne, in receiving her compliments on the occasion, had the amusement of connecting them with the silent admiration of her cousin, and of hoping she was to be blessed with a second spring of youth and beauty. Lady Russell, maybe it's because she was away from you.
Yeah.
And her dad and her older sister.
Yeah.
That she was so much improved. I don't know. It might be something to it, you guys.
Yeah.
In plumpness.
or maybe she was happy, like being with Captain Wentworth again.
Yeah.
Despite the flutterings of her nerves.
Where'd you go? Oh, yes. When they came to converse, she was soon sensible of some mental change, the subjects of which her heart had been full on leaving Kellynch, and which she had felt slighted and been compelled to smother among the Musgroves, were now become but of secondary interest. She had lately lost sight even of her father and sister and Bath. Their concerns had been sunk under those of Uppercross, and when Lady Russell reverted to their former hopes and fears, and spoke of her satisfaction in the house in Camden Place, which had been taken, and her regret that Mrs. Clay should still be with them, Anne would have been ashamed to have it known how much more she was thinking of Lyme and Louisa Musgrove and all her acquaintance there. How much more interesting to her was the home and the friendship of the Harvilles and Captain Benwick than her own father's house in Camden Place, or her own sister's intimacy with Mrs. Clay. Too right.
Seriously.
Who gives a single iota of shit about her dad and her sister and Mrs. Clay and Lady Russell's concerns over Mrs. Clay and whether they're happy in Bath? Like, who gives a single thought?
Yeah.
Who would? At least Anne has the sense there to be like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about all y'all's bullshit. I had way more interesting things to deal with.
Also, I was with someone who almost died.
Yeah. Also, I was with people who, other than Mary, actually like value me. And at least Mary values her on a certain level more so than Elizabeth does.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tila says, none of those things matter? Question mark, question mark, question mark.
Exactly.
And they didn't write to her.
Like, Mrs. Clay who?
Yeah. Well, like Elizabeth apparently didn't even write to her.
Yeah.
I think they established that at some point. So it's like, why should she be thinking of them?
Yeah,
she
no.
shouldn't.
There's no reason.
She was actually forced to exert herself to meet Lady Russell with anything like the appearance of equal solicitude on topics which had by nature the first claim on her. There was a little awkwardness at first in their discourse on another subject. They must speak of the accident at Lyme. Lady Russell had not been arrived 5 minutes the day before, when a full account of the whole had burst on her, and still it must be talked of. She must make inquiries. She must regret the imprudence, lament the result, and Captain Wentworth's name must be mentioned by both. Anne was conscious of not doing it so well as Lady Russell. She could not speak the name and look straight forward to Lady Russell's eye, till she should have adopted the expedient of telling her briefly what she thought of the attachment between him and Louisa. When this was told, his name distressed her no longer. Yeah, Anne, I wonder why it's harder for you to mention Captain Wentworth's name to Lady Russell than for her to mention his name to you. She obviously holds no scruples. Yeah. She obviously does not feel bad about ruining your life. You, on the other hand, feel bad about her ruining your life. Yeah. Amazing how that would work.
Yeah.
Lady Russell had only to listen composedly and wish them happy. But internally, her heart reveled in angry pleasure, in pleased contempt that the man who at 23 had seemed to understand somewhat of the value of an Anne Elliot should, 8 years afterwards, be charmed by a Louisa Musgrove. Wait, she's like mad?
She's like revenge pleased.
I can't figure out. It seems like... Oh, she's like pleased that he has been like... Well, he once appreciated Anne, who was like a big deal. Now he's the best he can do is Louisa Musgrove. Like, yeah. Oh my God, she's such a bitch. She's such a bitch.
She thinks that he's proven that he's not worthy of Anne by stooping to Louisa.
Oh fuck.
She's
oh my God. She's
also the way that Jane Austen describes her. Oh my God, she sounds so vicious.
She's awful.
Yeah.
The first 3 or 4 days passed most quietly, with no circumstance to mark them excepting the receipt of a note or two from Lyme, which found their way to Anne, she could not tell how, and brought a rather improving account of Louisa. At the end of that period, Lady Russell's politeness could repose no longer, and the faint self-threatenings of the past became in a decided tone. I must call on Mrs. Croft. I really must call upon her soon. Anne, have you the courage to go with me and pay a visit in that house? It will be some trial to us both. Anne did not shrink from it. On the contrary, she truly felt as she said in observing, I think you are very likely to suffer the most of the two. Your feelings are less reconciled to the change than mine. By remaining in the neighborhood, I am become inured to it. She could have said more on the subject, for she had in fact so high an opinion of the Crofts, and considered her father so very fortunate in his tenants, felt the parish to be so sure of a good example, and the poor of the best attention and relief, that however sorry or ashamed for the necessity of the removal, she could not but in conscience feel that they were gone who deserved not to stay, and that Kellynch Hall had passed into better hands than its owners.
Well, yeah.
Tila says, that was her being polite. Well, she kept all of her angry pleasure and pleased contempt inside, apparently.
Yes.
I love that. But Anne's like, I mean, Why would I'm fine with going to the house because I think these people are great and they're actually better for the neighborhood than my family was. But Lady Russell, you probably will find it quite hard because you're a stone cold.
That's what we're gonna call her. I honestly don't remember Lady Russell being so awful.
Yeah,
I don't know how it didn't impress itself more on me. I mean, I didn't like
Yeah.
her before, but I
Yeah.
didn't recall her being so awful.
Yeah. She's bad.
Yeah.
All right. In such moments, these convictions must unquestionably have their own pain, and severe was its kind, but they precluded that pain which Lady Russell would suffer in entering the house again and returning through the well-known apartments. In such moments, Anne had no power of saying to herself, "These rooms ought to belong only to us. Oh, how fallen in their destination! How unworthily occupied! An ancient family to be so driven away! Strangers filling their place!" No, except when she thought of her mother and remembered what she had been used to sit and preside, where she had been used to sit and preside, she had no sigh of that description to heave. That's another good one. Somebody write that one down. Yesterday I said, we have so many good turns of phrase in this book. I keep being like, oh yeah, somebody needs to write them down. But like yesterday was the first day I thought of it.
Oh.
Here, grab a pen, scribble that down. She had no sigh of that description to heave.
I think you do better to okay.
Where
am I going to write it?
That's fine. You don't have to write it.
All right.
Somebody write it down and then email it to me later or something, along with whatever the one. Tila, there was one yesterday and you typed it in the chat, but like I don't know if I can even see the chat. Sometimes YouTube doesn't show it to you after the fact.
Oh.
And I forgot to scroll back up and look for it. Anyway,
maybe
there was a really good one yesterday too. Characters of worth and suffering.
Ooh.
I was like, oh, that could be like the name of a documentary about Jane Austen's books. And then SD said later that reminded her of the more boring passages in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Which, even more. Yes. Characters of worth and suffering was yesterday's. Today's might be, she had no sigh of that description to heave.
Yes.
It's good. Mrs. Croft always met her with a kindness which gave her the pleasure of fancying herself a favorite, and on the present occasion, receiving her in that house, there was particular attention. The sad accident at Lyme was soon the prevailing topic, and on comparing the latest accounts of the invalid, it appeared that each lady dated her intelligence from the same hour of yestermorn, that Captain Wentworth had been in Kellynch yesterday, the first time since the accident, had brought Anne the last note, which she had not been able to trace the exact steps of, had stayed a few hours, and then returned again to Lyme, and without any present intention of quitting it any more. He had inquired after her, she found particularly, had expressed his hope of Miss Elliot's not being the worse for her exertions, and had spoken of those exertions as great. This was handsome, and gave her more pleasure than almost anything else could have done. Oh, Captain Wentworth. Came all the way to Kellynch, and then dropped a note. Physically, didn't just leave it with Mrs. Croft and be like, you can get this to Anne at some point. He actually went to Lady Russell's house.
Yeah.
So he could leave a note for her. Legit. That's
I'm kind of curious to know where Anne inquired. Did she just ask Lady Russell where the note came from? And Lady Russell was like, I don't know.
Maybe the note was left with a servant, and the servant was like,
true.
Oh, I didn't
know who it was.
I guess he might not have gone. Captain Wentworth might have sent a servant over there or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, apparently the information... You know what, though? Actually, that's a good point. I bet you Lady Russell knew it came from Captain Wentworth, and she was trying to hide that from Anne.
That was kind of what I was wondering, yeah.
That might be them making a point of saying, oh, she wasn't weird. Anne wasn't able to trace where that note had come from. Somehow that information got lost somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if that's the subtle reference. As to the sad catastrophe itself, it could be canvassed only in one style by a couple of steady, sensible women whose judgments had to work on ascertained events, and it was perfectly decided that it had been the consequence of much thoughtlessness and much imprudence, that its effects were most alarming, and that it was frightful to think how long Miss Musgrove's recovery might be yet doubtful, and how liable she would still remain to suffer from the concussion hereafter. The Admiral wound it all up summarily by exclaiming, "Aye, a very bad business indeed. A new sort of way, this, for a young fellow to be making love by breaking his mistress's head. Is it not, Miss Elliot? That is breaking a head and giving a plaster, truly. Breaking a head and giving a plaster, are those like figures of speech and he's kind of playing on them?
I think he might be referencing Jack and Jill, but
oh yeah, maybe.
I don't know. I also don't know what.
I bet it's referencing something like that, like a figure of speech or a nursery rhyme or something like that. All right. Admiral Croft's manners were not quite of the tone to suit Lady Russell. Is anything?
No.
But they delighted Anne. His goodness of heart and simplicity of character were irresistible.
Even when he's implying that Captain Wentworth practically threw her off the wall.
Right, yeah. He's referencing the fact that Captain Wentworth is in love with Louisa, supposedly, and also kind of jokingly suggesting that this is all his fault. But he's clearly joking about it. Yeah, which I think that's what she enjoys.
Which a lot of people do.
Yeah. Now, this must be very bad for you, said he, suddenly rousing from a little reverie, to be coming and finding us here. I had not recollected it before, I declare, but it must be very bad. But now, do not stand upon ceremony. Get up and go all over the rooms in this house, if you like it. Another time, sir, I thank you, not now. Well, whenever it suits you. You can slip in from the shrubbery at any time. And there you will find we keep our umbrellas hanging up by that door. A good place, is it not? But, checking himself, you will not think it a good place, for yours were always kept in the butler's room. Aye, so it always is, I believe. One man's ways may be as good as another's, but we all like our own best. And so you may judge for yourself whether it would be better for you to go about the house or not. Anne, finding she might decline it, did so very gratefully. We have made very few changes either, continued the Admiral after thinking for a moment. Very few. We told you about the laundry room at Uppercross. That has been a very great improvement. The wonder was how any family upon earth could bear with the inconvenience of its opening as it did so long. You will tell Sir Walter what we have done, and that Mr. Shepherd thinks it the greatest improvement the house ever had. Indeed, I must do ourselves the justice to say that the few alterations we have made have been all very much for the better. My wife should have the credit of them, however. I have done very little besides sending away some of the large looking glasses from my dressing room, which was your father's.
I did say some of, but there were several.
I did very little, except, I got rid of 10 of the 20 mirrors in your father's dressing room.
just seemed a little excessive.
Just a tad excessive. That is hilarious. A very good man, and very much the gentleman, I am sure. But I should think, Miss Elliot, looking with serious reflection, I should think he must be a rather dressy man for his time of life. Such a number of looking glasses. Oh, Lord, there was no getting away from oneself. So I got Sophie to lend me a hand, and we soon shifted their quarters. And now I am quite snug with my little shaving glass in one corner, and another great thing that I'd never go near. Oh my God, this delights me so much. You have no idea. This is like the best chapter. just Admiral Croft, being like, yeah, we've done very little to the house, except those things that your father did because he's banana pants.
I don't know if he's intending to cast shade on Sir Walter by saying at his time of life. But
I think it's just he probably was honestly amazed because most.
It's you don't see many men so full of themselves.
Well, most men just wouldn't care that
after
much.
20.
Right. After they're, once they're married, pretty much, I think they mostly stop caring. Come on.
I mean, most
I think he's not trying to, because he's saying oh, very much the gentleman. And but wow, so many looking glasses. He's I have a little shaving glass and then one other one, but I never really use it. Why would he particularly need to? You have servants to tell you if you look okay.
Yeah.
You don't need to look at yourself as much.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you have a servant who helps you dress, it's kind of their job to make sure everything is in order and you look good. You don't need to. If you've got full-length mirrors and a person who dresses you, you just like looking at yourself is the thing. Yeah. So it is. Anne, amused in spite of herself, was rather distressed for an answer, and the Admiral, fearing he might not have been civil enough, took up the subject again to say, Now, the next time you write to your good father, Miss Elliot, and pray give my compliments and Mrs. Crofts, and say that we are settled here quite to our liking and have no fault at all to find with the place, except for the few faults that we already fixed.
Yes.
No, he didn't say that. That was me. The breakfast room chimney smokes a little, I grant you, but it is only when the wind is due north and blows hard, which may not happen 3 times a winter. And take it altogether, now that we have been into most of the houses hereabouts and can judge, there is not one that we like better than this. Pray say so with my compliments. He will be glad to hear it. He will not.
Yeah.
That you should even suggest that any other house in the neighborhood could hold a candle to Kellynch would be an insult to Sir Walter.
Yeah. Also the approval of an admiral.
Also the approval of it, he would not care.
Yeah.
Not care.
Like, of course he likes it because it's my house.
Yeah.
And it's
he should
the
be
best.
lucky to ever get to live in such a house. Lady Russell and Mrs. Croft were very well pleased with each other. The acquaintance which this visit began was fated not to proceed far at present, for when it was returned, the Crofts announced themselves to be going away for a few weeks to visit their connections in the north of the country, and probably might not be at home again before Lady Russell would be removing to Bath. So ended all danger of Anne of meeting Captain Wentworth at Kellynch Hall, or of seeing him in company with her friend. Everything was safe enough, and she smiled over the many anxious feelings she had wasted on the subject. All right.
Well, I'm glad you could be so zen about it.
Mm-hmm. Chapter 14. Though Charles and Mary had remained at Lyme much longer than Mr. and Mrs. Musgrove's going, than Anne conceived they could have been at all wanted, they were yet the first of the family to be at home again, and as soon as possible after their return to Uppercross, they drove over to the lodge. They had left Louisa beginning to sit up, but her head, though clear, was exceedingly weak, and her nerves susceptible to the highest extreme of tenderness, and though she might be pronounced to be altogether doing very well, it was still impossible to say when she might be able to bear the removal home, and her father and mother, who must return in time to receive their younger children for the Christmas holidays, had hardly a hope of being allowed to bring her with them. They had been all in lodgings together. Mrs. Musgrove had got Mrs. Harville's children away as much as she could. Every possible supply from Uppercross had been furnished to lighten the inconvenience to the Harvilles, while the Harvilles had been wanting them to come to dinner every day, and in short, it seemed to have been only a struggle on each side as to which should be the most disinterested and hospitable. Mary had had her evils, but upon the whole, as was evident by her staying so long, she had found more to enjoy than suffer. Charles Hayter had been at Lyme oftener than suited her, and when they dined with the Harvilles, there had been only a maidservant to wait. Oh, can you believe it?
Think of it, only a maidservant.
And think of that, Lizzie. And at first, Mrs. Harville had always given Mrs. Musgrove precedence, as she should. But then she received so very handsome an apology from her on finding out whose daughter she was. And there had been so much going on every day. There had been so many walks between their lodgings and the Harvilles, and she had got books from the library and changed them so often that the balance had certainly been much in favor of Lyme. She had been taken to Charmouth, too, and she had bathed, and she had gone to church, and there had been a great many more people who looked to look at in the church at Lyme than at Uppercross. And all this, joined to the sense of being so very useful, had made really an agreeable fortnight.
Oh my God.
Just look at Mary.
I mean, going to church to look at people is, of course, why you go to church. Obviously.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Right.
Also that she thinks that she's useful.
Yeah.
Did you ever look
also
up?
Her, several times, Mrs. Harville actually gave my mother-in-law precedence over me.
Yeah.
But then she found out my dad's a baronet, and then she gave me some more attention. So
Yeah.
I guess it's fine.
So it's okay.
Guess it's fine.
Did you ever look up bathing machines? I forgot to show you.
Oh, no. What are bathing machines?
They're fantastic contraptions designed for prudent or modest bathing. Most of the articles are about Victorian ones, so I'm not sure about Regency ones, but they're contraptions they're like wagons that can wheel out into the water so that you can change in the wagon. And and then
I'm so confused.
and then jump directly from there into the water. Some with horses.
So you're like, you'll be seen as little as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm amazed at this. Is weird in and of itself, but the fact that they're called machines is the weirdest part.
That is definitely weird.
This is not a machine.
It's it's definitely, some of them look like machines. There's another one that had
a bathing machine. Sounds like a robot that bathes you.
It definitely does. Yes.
What is
there
this?
was one article that talked about here it is.
I don't want to get too bogged down because we have a hard out tonight. So.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
But I will definitely be looking that up afterwards because what
the fuck? Yes.
Anne inquired after Captain Benwick. Mary's face was clouded directly. Charles laughed. Oh, Captain Benwick is very well, I believe, but he is a very odd young man. I do not know what he would be at. We asked him to come home with us for a day or two. Oh, sorry, this is Mary speaking. Charles laughed, and then there's dialogue, but apparently it's Mary. Okay, Jane. Oh, Captain Benwick is very well, I believe, but he is a very odd young man. I do not know what he would be at. We asked him to come home with us for a day or two. Charles undertook to give him some shooting, and he seemed quite delighted, and for my part, I thought it was all settled. When, behold, on Tuesday night, he made a very awkward sort of excuse. He never shot, and he had been quite misunderstood, and he had promised this, and he had promised that, and by the end of it, I found that he did not mean to come. I suppose he was afraid of finding it dull, but upon my word, I should have thought we were lively enough at the cottage for such a broken-hearted man as Captain Benwick. Wow. Charles laughed again and said, Now, Mary, you know very well how it really was. It was all your doing, turning to Anne. He fancied that if he went with us, he should find you close by. He fancied everybody to be living in Uppercross. And when he discovered that Lady Russell lived 3 miles off, his heart failed him, and he had not courage to come. That is the fact, upon my honor. Mary knows it is. But Mary did not give into it very graciously. Does Mary do anything graciously?
No. For the daughter of a baronet, she certainly does not.
Whether from not considering Captain Benwick entitled by birth and situation to be in love with an Elliot, or from not wanting to believe Anne a greater attraction to Uppercross than herself, must be left to be guessed. Anne's goodwill, however, was not to be lessened by what she heard. She boldly acknowledged herself flattered and continued her inquiries. Oh, Anne's getting bold! All right.
Wow. Saucy.
Oh, he talks of you, cried Charles. In such terms, Mary interrupted him. I declare, Charles, I never heard him mention Anne twice all the time I was there. I declare, Anne, he never talks of you at all.
Wow. Jeez.
You think she would just be like, oh, yes, of course he's in love with you. You're an Elliot. But, not that matters. It won't,
Right.
Right. I'm sure he doesn't presume to actually do anything about it. But,
yes,
like, naturally.
Yeah.
Presumably, if he wasn't in love with Anne, Mary would be offended.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Who does he think he is?
No, admitted Charles. I do not know that he ever does in a general way, but, however, it is a very clear thing that he admires you exceedingly. His head is full of some books that he is reading upon your recommendation, and he wants to talk to you about them. He has found out something or other in one of them which he thinks, I cannot pretend to remember it, but it was something very fine. I overheard him telling Henrietta all about it, and then Miss Elliot was spoken of in the highest terms. Now, Mary, I declare it was so. I heard it myself, and you were in the other room. Don't fucking contradict me. Elegance, sweetness, beauty. Oh, there was no end to Miss Elliot's charms. And I am sure, cried Mary warmly, it was very little to his credit if he did. Miss Harville only died last June. Such a heart is very little worth having, is it, Lady Russell? I am sure you will agree with me. I must see Captain Benwick before I decide, said Lady Russell, smiling. Lady Russell has the sense to keep her bitchiness mostly on the inside.
Yes.
And that you are very likely to do soon, I can tell you, Mum, said Charles, though he had not nerves for coming away with us, and setting off again afterwards to pay a formal visit here. He will make his way over to Kellynch one day by himself, you may depend on it. I told him the distance and the road, and I told him of the churches being so very well worth seeing, for he has a taste for those sort of things. I thought it would be a good excuse, and he listened with all his understanding and soul. And I am sure from his manner that you will have him calling here soon. So I give you notice, Lady Russell. Any acquaintance of Anne's will always be welcome to me, was Lady Russell's kind answer. Lies.
Yeah.
Oh, as to being Anne's acquaintance, said Mary, I think he is rather my acquaintance, for I have been seeing him every day this last fortnight.
Oh my god.
It's like every line she says requires you to pause and go, for real?
What the fuck?
For real, though? Well, as your joint acquaintance, then, no, sorry, that's Lady Russell. Well, as your joint acquaintance, then, I shall be very happy to see Captain Benwick. Just shut up.
Both of you, shut up.
You will not find anything very agreeable in him, I assure you, Mum. He is one of the dullest young men that ever lived. He has walked with me sometimes from one end of the sands to the other without saying a word. He is not at all a well-bred young man. I am sure you will not like him at all.
What were you talking, Mary?
There we differ, Mary, said Anne. I think Lady Russell would like him. I think she would be so much pleased with his mind that she would very soon see no deficiency in his manner. So do I, Anne, said Charles. I am sure Lady Russell would like him. He is just Lady Russell's sort. Give him a book and he will read all day long. Yes, that he will, exclaimed Mary tauntingly. He will sit poring over his book and not know when a person speaks to him, or when one drops one's scissors, or anything that happens. Do you think Lady Russell would like that? Lady Russell could not help laughing. Upon my word, said she, I should not have supposed that my opinion of anyone could have admitted of such difference of conjecture, steady and matter-of-fact as I may call myself. I have really a curiosity to see the person who can give occasion to such directly opposite notions. I wish he may be induced to call here, and when he does, Mary, you may depend upon hearing my opinion, but I am determined not to judge him beforehand. You will not like him, I will answer for it. Lady Russell began talking of something else. Thank God. Mary spoke with animation of their meeting with, or rather missing, Mr. Elliot so extraordinarily. I can't believe it didn't come up sooner.
I know, right?
Like, I know Louisa's injury was the big talk, but like the fact that they talked about Captain Benwick that long before talking about Mr. Elliot's kind of amazing. I guess they only saw him briefly, but still, big deal. He is a man, said Lady Russell, whom I have no wish to see. His declining to be on cordial terms with the head of his family has left a very strong impression of his disfavor with me. This decision checked Mary's eagerness and stopped her short in the midst of the Elliot countenance. With regard to Captain Wentworth, though Anne hazarded no inquiries, there was voluntary communication sufficient. His spirits had been greatly recovering lately, as might be expected. As Louisa improved, he had improved, and he was now quite a different creature from what he had been the first week. He had not seen Louisa, and was so extremely fearful of any ill consequence to her from an interview that he did not press for it at all, and on the contrary seemed to have a plan of going away for a week or 10 days till her head was stronger. He had talked of going down to Plymouth for a week, and wanted to persuade Captain Benwick to go with him, but as Charles maintained at the last, Captain Benwick seemed much more disposed to ride over to Kellynch. There can be no doubt that Lady Russell and Anne were both occasionally thinking of Captain Benwick from this time. Lady Russell could not hear the doorbell without feeling that it might be his herald, nor could Anne return from any stroll of solitary indulgence in her father's grounds, or any...
I think that was a...
That sounded like the smoke detector.
Oh, no, it sounded like a...
Oh,
like
a car beeping outside?
Beeping,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
I hope it was that. Sorry, we just put a new battery in one of the smoke detectors, and I was like, if that battery's no good, I'm going to riot. Anyway, such a hassle getting the things down from the ceiling. Anyway. Heavens, where was I? It might be his herald. Nor could Anne return from any stroll of solitary indulgence in her father's grounds, or any visit of charity in the village, without wondering whether she might see him or hear of him. Captain Benwick came not, however. He was either less disposed for it than Charles had imagined, or he was too shy, and after giving him a week's indulgence, Lady Russell determined him to be unworthy of the interest which she had been beginning to excite.
Wow.
The Musgroves came back to receive their happy boys and girls from school, bringing with them Mrs. Harville's little children to improve the noise of Uppercross. Improve, that's one way of putting it.
That's a great statement.
Tila said fried batteries are gross, and I thought it said fried butterflies are gross, and I'm like, yeah, that's a weird statement to make. I have no idea where that came from. It does sound gross, but also, what is that?
Also, apropos of what?
To improve the noise of Uppercross and lessen that of Lyme. Henrietta remained with Louisa, but all the rest of the family were again in their usual quarters. Lady Russell and Anne paid their compliments to them once, when Anne could not but feel that Uppercross was already quite alive again. Though neither Henrietta nor Louisa nor Charles Hayter nor Captain Wentworth were there, the room presented as strong a contrast as could be wished to the last state she had seen it in. Immediately surrounding Mrs. Musgrove were the little Harvilles, whom she was sedulously?
Oh, sedulously?
Sedulously? Oh, I don't know that word.
I forget what it means.
Sedulously.
I think it has to do with
whom she was sedulously guarding from the tyranny of the two children from the cottage. Yeah, I have no doubt that Charles and Mary's children are little tyrants.
Yeah.
Expressly arrived to amuse them.
Dedication and diligence.
That works. That math checks out.
Yep.
On one side was a table occupied by some chattering girls cutting up silk and gold paper, and on the other were trestles and trays bending under the weight of brawn and cold pies, where riotous boys were holding high revel. The whole completed by a roaring Christmas fire, which seemed determined to be heard in spite of all the noise of the others.
A Christmas fire, which is very different from other fires.
A special Christmas fire.
Has like
well,
glitter,
they didn't.
Glitter in it.
It was It's weird that they didn't mention until now. That's why they're all there and cutting up silk and ribbons. And
well, they did mention that that was why the children were coming home from school.
Yes, it was mentioned, but I thought that had already passed.
Oh, okay.
I thought that had already happened and was over. So, anyway,
I think they would be back at school if that were.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. That makes sense. When they mentioned Christmas before, I thought it was mentioned in passing, like it.
Yeah.
It's only Christmas. It's not like it's Michaelmas or something important.
St. Stephen's Day.
Okay. Charles and Mary also came in, of course, during their visit, and Mr. Musgrove made a point of paying his respects to Lady Russell, and sat down close to her for 10 minutes, talking with a very raised voice, but from the clamor of the children on his knees, generally in vain. It was a fine family piece. There we have, again, an illustration of something that's actually happening and placed in the part of the book where it actually happened. Amazing.
What?
We have Mr. Musgrove with the children all over his knees talking to Lady Russell, who looks very like this.
Yes.
Why are you speaking to me?
Why children? Why speak?
I love it. Was a fine family piece. Anne, judging from her own temperament, would have deemed such a domestic hurricane a bad restorative of the nerves, which Louisa's illness must have so greatly shaken. But Mrs. Musgrove, who got Anne near her on purpose to thank her most cordially again and again for all her attentions to them, concluded a short recapitulation of what she had suffered herself. Is that what recap's short for? Recapitulation?
Yeah.
I never actually thought about what recap was short for.
I don't think I really thought about it, but yeah.
My mind has been blown. Recapitulation. I mean, that doesn't, just in terms of what I know capitulation to mean, that doesn't seem to make sense, but also in context, it seems obvious that that's what it means.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
A short recapitulation of what she had suffered herself by observing with a happy glance round the room that after she had gone through, nothing was so likely to do her good as a little quiet cheerfulness at home. It doesn't sound very quiet, but it is nice to know that she's like, honestly, being able to help out the Harvilles by taking their kids away and just having children around at Christmas is, she is the sort of person, it seems like, who would be, that would cheer her up when one of her children is ill and she can't really help.
Yeah.
Louisa was now recovering apace. I love the word apace.
Yes.
People do not use it enough anymore. Her mother could even think of her being able to join their party at home before her brothers and sisters went to school again. The Harvilles had promised to come with her and stay at Uppercross whenever she returned. Captain Wentworth was gone for the present to see his brother in Shropshire. I hope I shall remember in future, said Lady Russell, as soon as they were reseated in the carriage, not to call at Uppercross in the Christmas holidays.
Bitch.
Everybody has their taste in noises as well as in other matters, and sounds are quite innoxious or most distressing by their sort rather than their quantity. When Lady Russell, not long afterwards, was entering Bath on a wet afternoon and driving through the long course of streets from the Old Bridge to Camden Place, amidst the dash of other carriages, the heavy rumble of carts and drays, the bawling of newsmen, muffin men, and milkmen, and the ceaseless clink of pattens, she made no complaint. No, these were noises which belonged to the winter pleasures. Her spirits rose under their influence, and like Mrs. Musgrove, she was feeling, though not saying, that after being long in the country, nothing could be so good for her as a little quiet cheerfulness. That is kind of, I do like that. I mean, Lady Russell's a bitch, but
yeah,
especially to say that out loud. But like, it is kind of a good point. It's like,
yeah,
it's not that it was too loud. It's just that Lady Russell doesn't like kids.
Yeah, which honestly
she doesn't like being in the country.
Not surprise me at all.
Like, without forgiving Lady Russell kind of being a bitch in the situation, it was going, hey, takes all kinds.
Yeah, it's true.
It was a very fair way of pointing out one of the ways in which Lady Russell, as Tila puts it, Lady Russell hates joy. Anne did not share these feelings. She persisted in a very determined, though very silent, disinclination for Bath. Caught the first dim view of the extensive buildings, smoking and rain, without any wish of seeing them better, felt their progress through the streets to be, however disagreeable, yet too rapid. For who would be glad to see her when she arrived? Anne looked back with fond regret to the bustles of Uppercross and the seclusion of Kellynch. Elizabeth's last letter had communicated a piece of news of some interest. Mr. Elliot was in Bath. He had called in Camden Place, had called a second time, a third, had been pointedly attentive. If Elizabeth and her father did not deceive themselves, had been taking as much pains to seek the acquaintance and proclaim the value of the connection as he had formerly taken pains to show neglect. This was very wonderful if it were true. In what meaning of the word wonderful? And Lady Russell was in a state of very agreeable curiosity and perplexity about Mr. Elliot, already recanting the sentiment she had so lately expressed to Mary of his being a man whom she had no wish to see. She had a great wish to see him. If he really sought to reconcile himself like a dutiful branch, he must be forgiven for having dismembered himself from the paternal tree. Very nice little turn of phrase there, Jane.
The metaphor is amazing.
Anne was not animated to an equal pitch by the circumstance, but she felt that she would rather see Mr. Elliot again than not, which was more than she could say for many other persons in Bath. Anne's getting downright catty.
At least in her mind.
In your mind.
Yes.
She was put down in Camden Place, and Lady Russell then drove to her own lodgings in Rivers Street. And that is a perfectly timed ending of that chapter. Thank you. It's just a blessing that on the day when I really needed to cut out, I did not have to find a good ending place. There we are at the end of chapter 14.
Thanks, Jane.
Absolutely perfect. Thank you. Wow. Oh, Teal said, I thought for a second we were in the bustle era of fashion there.
Oh.
No, not that kind of bustle.
No.
But yes, boy, after so much happening in the previous
yes
chapters, this was sort of just a lot of Anne's character development, honestly.
Yeah.
I really think we're getting, even though so far it's mostly in her own thoughts.
Yeah.
She still has there's a couple times when she actually says something you think, previously she might have like demurred or whatever.
Yeah.
Being away from her family was clearly very good for her.
Being away from Lady Russell was good.
Well, being away from Lady Russell, but also
especially being away from her family.
Yeah, being away from her father and sister, who were like Lady Russell, all three of them just hold her down.
Yeah.
And at least even though Mary was completely ridiculous, Mary clearly like I think even Mary kind of makes Anne feel a little more useful
Yes.
than Elizabeth does.
She clearly likes to feel useful, possibly even more than Jane Bennet likes to. At least she talks about it a great deal more.
Yeah. But also, like, I guess it's one thing just to put it as I like to feel useful, but like if you spend a lot of time with people who make you feel useless, it would be very nice to be made to feel useful. So
also, I think she kind of feels that at this point in her life, that's her best.
Yeah.
The best thing that she can
Yeah.
be.
Which is, I don't know. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with liking to feel as if you are helping other people.
No, it's just, I just kind of see in it a little bit that's her highest aspiration.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's not a bad aspiration, certainly.
That's true.
Certainly she is surrounded by a lot of useless people.
Yes, who need help.
Yes.
But also and I honestly think being around Captain Wentworth and finally feeling just not having that sort of it being like obviously she still cares for him, and so being around him, even though it makes her a little bit sad, also helps her because she still cares for him. But also there were so many years of him just being sort of this like sad ghost of the past, and to just be able to be around him and a social thing and for him to be very polite and kind to her and not act as if he still feels, wounded or whatever.
Right.
Or like he's angry at her or something. I think that makes a huge difference to her peace of mind as well. So anyway, and also meeting Captain Benwick, who actually like valued her opinions and read books that she recommended. Like so much was done for her. Just meeting a couple of people of sense, like the Harvilles and Mrs. Croft, did a lot for her. So all right. Yes, as Tila says, that's healing.
Yes.
Anyway, let's wrap it up because it's Dandelion Stream will be starting very shortly. I'm going to post the link in the chat again. If anybody wants to come over and catch some of that, I shall be hopping over there as soon as I hit end stream on this one. So we will be back tomorrow at the normal time at 6:30 to read the next chapter and find out what becomes of Anne in Bath. And also, what is Mr. Elliot's deal? What's he all about?
What indeed?
How wonderful is it, and in what meaning of the way wonderful, that he's suddenly sucking up to Sir Walter and Elizabeth? So we'll find out tomorrow. Same bat time. Same persuasive time. Same persuasive channel.
Yes. Quite.